it's entitled The Poor, the Conservative Dilemma. In vain do they worship me, holding the tradition of men. Jesus said, Mark 7, verses 7 through 8. Since the 1980s, the religious conservative Christians who backed Ronald Reagan's supply-side economics program have tried in all manner of ways to justify their mistreatment of the poor. They blame the poor for their condition. They call the poor lazy, inefficient, and lacking in character. They don't wish to give their change to the poor unless they can tell the poor how to spend it. At times it seems that those who work envy those on welfare. None of this is Christian behavior, as defined by the Bible. Yet these religious conservatives will tout their Christian character. They are liars. If we can prove this from within their own frame of reference, then they are exposed. Their hidden agenda of political power-mongering now puts them in league with Satan. And this is our task. In 2 Timothy, chapter 3, verses 2 through 5, we are told of a time when men will be lovers of self, lovers of money, proud, arrogant, lovers of pleasure, rather than lovers of God, holding the form of religion, but denying the power of it. Right-wing religio-political organizations like Pat Robertson's Christian Coalition, in contrast to the teachings of the Bible, maintain that Christians must become political and vote in their own kind. These are people of good character who don't lie. These same Christian soldiers then nominate as Senator of Virginia the traitor and liar Oliver North. It can't be more clear. These religious nuts don't want true Christians running for office. They only want someone to help with their agenda. A true Christian can't lie under any circumstances. Jesus didn't lie before Pontius Pilate. The religion practiced by the Christian Coalition is a farce, superficial, not Christian, but counterfeit Christian. Real Christians are told not to love the world as the Christian Coalition does in 1 John chapter 2, verses 15 through 16. The true motives of religious conservatives become clear when we examine their attitudes toward the poor. In many places in the Bible, the Christian is told that when he helps the poor, he helps Jesus. Matthew 25, verses 37 through 39. Apathetic, atheistic readers might not care about all this religious stuff, but they should keep in mind that a cultural war between liberal and conservative ideas is raging in America. At the moment, the William Bennetts and Rush Limbaughs are winning. They get away with their strident morality because most of us lack true knowledge of the Bible. And when we argue from without their religious frame of reference, we come off as anti-moralists. We must attack these people from a biblical perspective, or they will not hear us. They will not be exposed as frauds and be brought to a halt. From the true Christian perspective, Satan is the god of this world. 2 Corinthians. chapter 4, verse 4, and Isaiah 14, verse 13. With their counterfeit Christianity, the Christian coalition has transformed Satan into an angel of light. 2 Corinthians 11, 13 through 15. These people preach a different gospel than the one Jesus brought. They worship Jesus, but don't do what he says. Matthew 7, verse 21. True Christians are to put God first in their lives. They are to give all their goods and money to the poor. Mark 10, Luke 18, verses 22 through 23. They're not to take part in the politics of Satan's world. We have not reached the goal, but given the chance to go forward with the policies of the last 8 years, and we shall soon, with the help of God, be within sight of the day when poverty will be banished from the nation. These were the words of President Herbert Hoover, 8/12/1928, just before the Great Depression. Hoover had turned the government over to business. Andrew Mellon was Secretary of the Treasury under Presidents Harding, Coolidge, and Hoover. In 1928, the taxes of the rich were cut, and by 1929, 5% of Americans with the highest incomes were raking in 1/3 of all personal income. A dangerous over-concentration of wealth in the wrong hands, economically speaking. Some causes of the Great Depression of 1929 were prices and profits were high, business monopolies were common, wages were low, and there was too much production. Too much production, supply, creates demand, is supply-side economics, Reaganomics, voodoo economics. Overproduction caused farm surpluses. More goods were produced by fewer workers. Fewer employees meant less money to less people to buy goods. The reader should keep this in mind when we discuss Social Security and welfare. In the 1920s, there was easy credit, and the stock market was a gambling machine. All this, an over-concentration of wealth in the rich, were causes of the Great Depression. By 1930, Henry Ford had laid off 3/4 of his workers. Children didn't go to school, so schools closed for lack of funds. Child labor laws were not obeyed. Rent was 20 to 25% of one's income. Blacks paid 40 to 50%. Killings of blacks doubled so whites could get their jobs. Small business collapsed or was swallowed up by big business, the big boys. Shanty towns to house the homeless sprang up. Hoovervilles. During World War I, Herbert Hoover had been relief administrator in Europe. He generously gave food and funds to foreigners, but when he became president of the United States, he gave nothing to the sufferers of the Great Depression. No doles to United States citizens. In 1933, some 13 to 16 million people were unemployed. This was 25% of the population of the nation. By 1931, it was clear that private and public charities weren't able to deal with the situation. There was a lack of faith in private enterprise, and the preaching of rugged individualism was exposed as hollow rhetoric. When Franklin D. Roosevelt became president, business and conservatives fought his programs at every turn. FDR had stated publicly that he was out to save capitalism. What conservatives and supply-siders hide from view is the fact that without Social Security, welfare, and unemployment insurance, capitalism would have ceased to exist in America. These programs saved capitalism's ass. The poor hate the police. They mistrust the government. They are cynics about religion. Maybe this is why conservatives dislike the poor. For decades, conservatives have kept the truth of what must be done about the poor from us. Quote, neither alone nor with help can the poor change the circumstances of their lives without major adjustments throughout the system. Unquote. Karl Marx said that poverty is a normal condition of capitalism. The differential between wages of the poor and the income of the rich would continue to grow. In 1946, our poor received 5% of income. And by 1967, this same bottom 20%, 40 million people received 5.4% of income. So much for the trickle-down economics of the 1950s. Notice how none of this has anything to do with the poor being lazy or inefficient. The truth is, in the past, like conservatism, liberalism has been excessively tender toward the rich, said John Kenneth Galbraith. The poor simply lack money and power. In days of yore, there existed kings with lots of money who were lazy, stupid, demented, of bad character, and retarded. Yet they weren't poor. They weren't held back socially because of their circumstances. So it seems that the conservative view of the poor is inaccurate. The fact is, conservatives detest the poor, and they justify their attitude with inaccurate religious precepts. Historically, the Republican Party's role has been to tilt power, policy, wealth, and income toward the richest portions of the population, said Kevin Phillips. During the 1980s, the gulf between rich and poor grew larger. Opportunity counted more than equality. It was a heyday for unearned income like rents, dividends, interest, and capital gain. Only a tiny segment of Americans were offered the American dream. The 1981 tax cuts under Reagan favored the rich and corporations. When Thomas Jefferson left the office of President of the United States, he said, I hope we shall crush in its birth the aristocracy of our moneyed corporations. Unquote. We didn't. Republican presidential cycles result in a free market excesses and concentration, over-concentration of wealth, said Kevin Phillips. Labor loses when conservatives regulate. During the 1980s, money was used to make money, and conservatives equated this with production. But there was no production of goods and services to raise the standards of living. In 1828, there were no great fortunes in America, and there were few large fortunes, and no poverty. Some 60 years later, there was some poverty, many large fortunes, said Lord Bryce. America's first billionaires were John D. Rockefeller and Henry E. Ford. One lesson we Americans have not yet learned is that private greed is a threat to our national security. Shifts of 3 to 5% of realignments of wealth to the rich hurt small America and weaken families. Our present financial picture shows us that during the 1980s, our government's excessive commitment to private wealth worked against the national interest. Anyone thinking clearly is not surprised by this, because we know that Ronald Reagan went to Washington to destroy our government as we know it. A nation can't exist without revenue, said Alexander Hamilton. He also said that commerce makes the payment of taxes easier. In essence, anyone with a growing income should not balk at paying taxes. The art of economics consists in looking not merely at the immediate, but at the larger effects of any act or policy. It consists in tracing the consequences of that policy, not merely for one group, but for all groups. This did not happen in the 1980s. Bad economists confuse need with demand and forget that demand not only requires need, it requires purchasing power. If we run our economy to benefit the rich, how many refrigerators can they buy? Conservatives always give us the trickle-down lie that the rich must be placated. But the fact is, the poor are more important than the rich to our consumption-driven economy. If we route money to the rich, we create a plantation, a feudal economy where only a small number of people can buy goods. This method can't sustain our over $7 trillion economy. A substantial part of government spending is for investment. That's good for our economy. The recovery of 1982 to 1988 was cyclical in nature. It had nothing to do with Reaganomics, which had only negative effects. Every 5-6 years, our economy hits a business cycle peak. In the early 1800s, only 10% of our population lived in towns, and only 5 to 6% lived in places of more than 2,500 people. We had small, independent, corporate family farms economies. The group was all important. Individualism was not encouraged. Almost every family owned property. In 1835, there were 113 millionaires in New York City. By 1890, we We were a country of haves and have-nots. The modern industrial city, with its alienation, was upon us, and the basic unit of society was becoming the self. Life was now viewed in the short term. This self-interest in business and politics led to corruption. Today, capitalism's problem is not the production of goods and services. It is how to get income to all participants in our system, said John Kenneth Galbraith. He also said that by one device or another, conservatives try to evade responsibility for the welfare of the poor. To be without money is a grave limitation on an individual's freedom. Conservative greed does not sit with Mark 10, Luke 18, verses 22 through 23. Today's conservative Christian politics do not conform to Romans 12, verse 1 through 2, Galatians 5, verses 19 through 21, Matthew 26, verse 11, and John 12, verse 8. Jesus told us that the poor would always be with us as a test. How the Christian treats the poor is how he would act toward Jesus. The true Christian can't sweep the poor under the rug like Mayor Giuliani of New York City tried to do. According to the Bible, this world is evil, and Jesus doesn't pray for it. John 17, verse 9. Matthew 24, verses 1 through 3. This world is founded on vanity, self-centeredness, lust, competition, and strife. Psalms 127, verse 1. The true Christian is to have the mind of King Solomon. Quote, nothing in this world is worthwhile. Striving after wind, utterly vain. Everything is vanity. Unquote. One's God is that which one obeys. Quote, where your treasure is, there is your heart. Unquote. Matthew 6, verse 21. Charity is the bond of perfectness. Colossians 3, verse 14. The love of money is the root of all evil. Timothy 6, verse 10. And remember Proverbs 22:16. He who oppresses the poor to increase his riches, and he who gives to the rich shall surely come to want. Contrary to what Rush Limbaugh and the other conservative talk show hosts teach, the Lord is not for self-reliance. Haggai 2, verse 17. It is a sin to withhold bread from the hungry. Job 22, verse 7. Christian bigotry, as Pat Robertson would have us believe. This is truth, according to their frame of reference, their Bible that they are supposed to have studied and know about. Those who preach a religio-capitalistic conservatism which would rob the poor of their meager doles are not doing God's work. Proverbs 14, verse 31. And here's one for our nation and those religious supply-siders who want the 1980s back. Quote, oh, this is my favorite quote, and I just quoted it. He that oppresses the poor to increase his riches, and he that gives to the rich shall surely come to want. Proverbs 22, verse 16. This is the proverb that sticks in their craw. They can't get around this proverb. I use it as much as I can. Christian conservatives must give to the poor. They must stop bad-mouthing Social Security and welfare. By the way, trying to destroy these programs. These programs allow a large portion of our population to buy refrigerators and to participate in the economy. This is good for our country and for our economy. It is right, it is good to give to the poor and leave the rich to their own resources. They have, that is the rich, they have their consolation. They need no help. The end.
Hi, this is William Morrow. Are you one of those people who join a health club, and after they have your big, overpriced annual membership, you notice that you're on your own with little or no results even after all the promises? Then the website Personal Trainer is for you.
Thank you very much, William H. Morrow III.
So you lost another argument with a conservative, right-wing Republican. He talked over you. He screamed and yelled. He brought out the Bible. He thumped it. He quoted scripture to you. You were lost because you came at him with facts. Nothing but facts. And you expected that would make you look good. That would make you win the argument, but it didn't. You know why you lost the argument? You know why you're going to lose your next argument? Because you don't read Censored. Censored, a 30-year-old newsletter that shows you how to defeat a conservative. Read Censored, and you'll have all the ammunition you need. Every time you get into an argument with a right-wing conservative, so-called Christian. Censored, that's all you need. Read it, and defeat a conservative.
Greetings, listeners. Let me speak to you for a moment about the foundation of our entire organization, Newsletters Censored. It was founded by our mentor, the Reverend Dr. William J. Eisenman, in 1977. It discusses the 5 taboos of American life: politics, religion, health, human sexuality, and child rearing. You won't find anything like this in the mainstream media and the press. It reveals the kind of truth that most people are afraid to hear. Can you handle it? We are living in the end times, so in order to defeat a conservative and save America, you need Newsletters Censored. Go to www.newslettercensored.com, click on the printable order form page, and with your gift to support this work, get your free annual subscription. This is James P. Madonna of Megalife 21, the hardest hitting internet talk radio station on the planet.